Hi class, my name's Megan. Today we're going to discuss some ways that we can address homelessness. This headline, How One Universal Basic Income Experiment is Helping the Homeless Get Off the Street, was my starting point in exploring homelessness in the US and in the world and some programs that can help us combat homelessness. This Universal Basic Income program is called Miracle Money, and we'll discuss it more later. My exploration into homelessness led me to ask many questions, like how many homeless individuals are there in the United States? What factors contribute to ongoing homelessness? What programs are there in the United States that support people in getting housing? But all of these questions led to one main question, and that's what we're going to try to answer today. What program or programs can best decrease the number of homeless individuals in the United States? Here's our agenda for today. So we're going to start by going over data, including the statistics on homelessness in the United States, comparing data from the United States to the rest of the world, looking at the contributing factors of homelessness. Then we're going to review 4 programs that address homelessness: Miracle Money, which we discussed a little bit earlier, Tiny Homes for the Homeless, which is a program in Los Angeles, Streetwise, which is a program in Chicago, and Housing First. Then we're going to explore the data and review it with which of these 4 programs is most effective in increasing housing, as well as exploring the cost of each program. Then we're going to review new federal funds that are available to address homelessness and explore how that funding can be used to expand the program that we have found most effective. Here are some basic statistics on homelessness in the United States. The data on this slide and the next few slides were collected through the National Alliance to End Homelessness. They did a point-in-time collection of data in January 2020. So none of this data reflects coronavirus and how that impacted homelessness. So the total number of homelessness in January 2020 in the United States was 580,000. Out of those 580,000, 38.9 were unsheltered, 61% were men, and the rates of homelessness have been increasing in the United States since 2016. To understand the U.S. homeless population a little bit better, we can look at the different groups included within the population. As discussed before, there are over 580 homeless individuals altogether. Included within this are individuals, and that's 480,000. The vast majority of homeless individuals are individual, and then there are 171,000 people and families. This is men and women with children. The chronically homeless individuals, over 100,000. This is people that have been continuously homeless for over a year, or have been homeless at least 4 times in the last 3 years, all the time adding up to a year. You can see that there's a good portion of veterans at 37,000, and then unaccompanied youth, so that's anyone under 25 that's homeless, 34,000. So here we're looking at homelessness by race and ethnicity in the United States. As a whole, white people do make up the largest group of homeless individuals in the United States at 280,000. But historically marginalized racial groups are far more likely to be homeless. So this graph shows different races and ethnicities and how many homeless people per 100,000 people within the United States. So as you can see, the Pacific Islanders have um, by far the highest rate at 109 out of every 10,000 people. You can see that African Americans and Native Americans also have very high rates of homelessness. So here's a graph of the overall homelessness from 2007 to 2020 in the United States. This data was also taken from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. As you can see, homelessness was decreasing at a pretty steady rate until 2016. And then since 2016, homelessness has been increasing. Between 2019 and 2020, homelessness increased by 2% nationwide. Um, just to note, some of the subpopulations that we discussed earlier um, have had reduced rates since 2016, and that's including individuals with families and veterans. The differences between groups is caused by additional support for some subpopulations. Now that we have an understanding of homelessness in the United States, let's take a look at the world. The last time a global survey on homelessness was attempted, it was by the UN in 2005. An estimated 100 million people were homeless worldwide. The world population was 6.512 billion in 2005. So we can estimate that there were 153.6 homeless people per 10,000 people worldwide. This compares to the US in 2020 at 17.62 people that are homeless per 100,000 people. Um, that's a huge difference, and you can see the problems that arise in the United States with our homeless population. You can just imagine with some other countries with much more of a homeless crisis than we have. So here we're further examining homelessness in the world compared to the United States. As stated before, in the United States, we have 17.62 homeless individuals per 10,000 people. Many countries have way higher homeless rates than we do. Nigeria had 1,658 homeless individuals per 10,000 in 2007, and Syria had 3,753 homeless individuals per 10,000 in 2020. Some countries also have a lot less homelessness than we do in the United States. Homelessness does not exist in some countries, and in Japan, they only have a homelessness rate of 0.3 per 10,000 people. So there's a lot of variety in the rates of homelessness in the world, and you have to think that a lot of this has to do with what policies and what programs these countries have in place to support the disadvantaged in the countries. And we're going to discuss some programs later that might be able to support us in getting more towards where Japan is with homelessness. Um, Before discussing programs that might help decrease homelessness in the United States, let's look at some contributing factors. So the first contributing factor is housing prices. As we know in California, housing prices continue to rise and rise, which makes it more difficult for all of us to pay rent. In 2019, 6.3 million American households spent more than 50% of their income on housing. Poverty rates are another contributing factor to homelessness. 10.5% of the US population lives in poverty. This causes struggles to afford housing. And the third contributing factor to homelessness um, are mental health and substance use. In 2019, 36% of chronically homeless individuals had substance use or severe mental illness or both. Um, So when we look at the homeless population as a whole, it's important to keep in mind what causes people to find themselves in a position where they are homeless. Here we are with 4 programs that address homelessness. So these are 4 programs that are in the United States that are run by nonprofit organizations that support people in getting off the streets and support homeless people. Miracle Money, the Universal Basic Income Program, that was discussed in the article at the beginning. Hope of the Valley Tiny Homes for the Homeless. In Los Angeles, they are building tiny homes for the homeless, different villages. As you can see in the picture on the right, that's a picture of one of the villages. Streetwise, a hand up, not a hand out. Streetwise is a program in Chicago, and they support homeless individuals by helping them get a job selling magazines. And Adobe services Housing First. So Housing First is a program that supports homeless individuals in getting straight into permanent housing to support them in their life and getting off the street. So here's our first program, Miracle Money. In order to compare these programs, I'm going to ask 4 basic questions for each program. What is the program? How has it affected the homeless population? What proportion of people served found permanent housing? And how much does the program cost? So starting with what the program is for Miracle Money, this program is in the Bay Area and it has given $500 per month in direct cash transfers, which is the universal basic income, to homeless individuals. They also provide social support through a buddy system. The buddy will call at least once a week to the homeless individual. They also have optional financial coaching. The scope of it was only with 14 homeless individuals chosen by the volunteers at the program. How has it affected the homeless population? Support provided by the buddies has helped provide hope and community, and the $500 has helped individuals find housing and food. What proportion of people served found permanent housing? 35% were able to find permanent housing. How much does Miracle Money cost? For each program, we are going to estimate the cost. So for Miracle Money, we have the $500 per month per homeless individual in direct transfers. And then for the Miracle Friend or Buddy is a volunteer of 1 hour per week. So if the buddy was a paid position, it would be at least $25 a week per homeless individual or $100 per month per homeless individual. Since administrative costs will be similar for each program, we're not going to estimate them. The total estimated cost for Miracle Money is at least $600 per month per homeless individual. Here's our second program, Hope of the Valley Tiny Homes for the Homeless. These are very cool. You guys should look up Hope of the Valley Tiny Homes for the Homeless. What is the program? The program is Tiny Home Villages in Los Angeles, interim housing. They also provide on-site showers, case management, housing navigation, mental health, job training, and placement. The scope is that there are 6 villages in Los Angeles with 908 beds. So this has been a huge program that they're getting off the ground in Los Angeles, which is good because they have a high density of homeless people in Los Angeles. How has it affected the homeless population? Immediately helps people get off the street and into interim housing, provides services that support homeless individuals in increasing stability. What proportion of people served found permanent housing? Within a 4 to 6 month period, the majority of tiny home residents are placed into permanent housing. over 50%. So as you can see, a lot more expense in this program, but it does lead to a higher number of people finding permanent housing. How much does Hope of the Valley tiny homes cost? So per NBC, the tiny home project in Los Angeles is costing the city $43,000 per bed to build. We're going to track this since we are tracking per month per homeless individual. We're going to track this as $500 per month in rent per homeless individual. The case management, housing navigation, mental health services, job training, and placement would cost at least $400 per month per resident. We're probably rounding down a little bit, but we've been doing that throughout, so it should be pretty consistent. The facility maintenance and utilities would probably be at least $50 per resident per month. Again, since administrative costs will be similar for each program, they will not be estimated. So, total estimated cost at least $950 per month per homeless individual. And again, the investment of $43,000 per bed. Our third program is Streetwise, and their saying is a hand up, not a handout. What is the program? It's a Chicago-based program that provides job training, ongoing support, and incentives to support homeless individuals or people in poverty to gain employment through selling magazines. So Streetwise, they make a magazine and they sell it to homeless individuals at 90 cents per magazine, and then the homeless individual can sell it for $2 and keep the profit from the magazine. The program also provides meals, emergency clothing, hygiene kits, case management, and telephone use. How has it affected the homeless population? It provides flexible employment opportunities. Vendors earn money to pay for transportation, phone, housing, clothes, healthcare. It has helped employ over 500 individuals. What proportion of people served found permanent housing? So they did not report a percentage of people who found permanent housing, but the estimated number is small, around 10%. So how much does the Streetwise Vendors program cost? This program costs the Streetwise magazine their potential profits for the magazine. As I said earlier, the vendors purchase the magazine at wholesale price at 90 cents per magazine and sell it to the public at $2. Also, the cost of meals, emergency clothing and hygiene kits, case management, and telephone use could be estimated at $100 per month per individual served. The administration costs will be similar for each program, so it's not going to be estimated. So the total cost for Streetwise is much lower than the other programs at about $100 per month plus the magazine's potential profits. Adobe Services Housing First, this is our fourth program. What is the program? It supports homeless individuals and families in the Bay Area find permanent housing. So as you can see on the bottom, they have the typical model for finding homeless people housing. So the homeless, and then they go to the shelter where they can get their medical, behavioral, and mental health checked. Then they can go into transitional housing, and that's where they can get an income and a relationship with the landlord, and then they go into permanent housing. So housing first is a different model, and it says if you put somebody into permanent housing right away, then they can get all their needs met and their life can be stable quicker. So that's what this program does. As you can see, it's probably much more expensive because you are supporting people and getting into permanent housing before they would have an income, um, which could obviously get pretty expensive, especially in the Bay Area. How has it affected the homeless population in the Bay Area? So it provides permanent housing right away, which reduces ER visits, incarceration, and chronic homelessness. What proportion of people served found permanent housing? 86% of the program's recipients were rehoused. So also by far the biggest percent of people that are permanently off the streets. How much does Adobe Services Housing First program cost? The cost of this program would be really high because it would have to cover the cost of permanent housing. We're estimating in the Bay Area that at least you would have to pay $1,200 per month per homeless individual for that permanent housing. The cost of supportive services would be at least $100 per month per individual. Again, administrative costs are not going to be estimated because they're probably the same throughout all of the programs. Total estimated cost at least $1,300 per month per homeless individual. Which program is most effective in helping people find housing? So here we are answering the question that we started with. The interesting part is as you can see by these graphs, the effectiveness, the percent housed, is very similar to the estimated cost per homeless individual. So the more money that you spend on a program, the more effective it is in helping people find permanent housing. So this leaves us with kind of a question of, so what should we use in the United States? We can't possibly use the housing first model all over the place. There's not enough money to go around to build and give every single homeless individual permanent housing. But if we only use the programs that are less supportive and that cost less, we're not going to be super effective in solving the homeless crisis. So my thought is using some programs like the Universal Basic Income Program across the United States, and then in areas with more density of homeless populations like Los Angeles or the Bay Area could use programs more like the Hope of the Valley or the Housing First model. We're going to discuss that a little bit more as we go through. Okay, so here's very similar to what we were just talking about, which program is best. The effectiveness of each program directly relates to how much each program costs. In order to support the most people, I would suggest that the more expensive, extensive programs like the tiny home villages and the Housing First be used in areas of high density of homelessness, and that programs like Streetwise and Universal Basic Income be implemented throughout the country. Here we get a little better picture of how homelessness is dispersed throughout the United States. The map on the left shows the density of homelessness in different parts of the United States. As you can see, lots of parts of California have a lot of homelessness in density, as well as Washington, some in Florida, Hawaii, and up in New York. Other parts of the country have more spread out homelessness. It's still a big issue, but it's not as dense. Here are some of the cities with the most homelessness in the United States. So we have New York City, Los Angeles, Seattle, San Jose, Oakland, San Francisco, San Diego, we're on there, Phoenix, Santa Ana, and the District of Columbia. So these are the kind of cities that I would suggest they use the more extensive approach with building tiny home villages or implementing housing first programs. Whereas in a lot of the places in the middle of the country where the homelessness is more dispersed and not as concentrated, uh, using a program like the money, the miracle money, could be very helpful doing universal basic income throughout that area. Okay, so where is this money coming from? There are new federal funds to address homelessness. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES Act of 2020, included $4 billion for homelessness assistance that is being distributed to states, counties, and cities through emergency solution grants. And in 2021, the America Rescue Plan Act, ARP Act of 2021, includes $5 billion of new funding to reduce homelessness and will be distributed through the HOME program formula. So the programs that we discussed before could be implemented more broadly throughout the country using the funding from these bills. So how can these funds be used to expand the programs that we discussed? So one way that they could be used is that the Universal Basic Income Program for the homeless could be implemented throughout the United States using the funds from the CARES Act and the ARP Act. How that would work, as we discussed before, there are about 580,000 homeless individuals in the United States, and if each one was given $500, it would cost $290 million per month, or about $3.48 billion a year. Um, and that could come out of the $9 billion allocated to help homelessness through the CARES Act and the ARP Act. Again, this would need further funding in the future if this program was to be extended past a year. The other funds could go towards the tiny home villages or permanent housing for homeless people in cities with high densities of homelessness. Okay, to review what we've discussed, homelessness is a big problem in the United States and in the rest of the world. We reviewed the 4 programs, and they all decrease the number of homeless individuals on the streets. The CARES Act and the ARP Act provide federal funding to address homelessness, and using federal funding to expand universal basic income programs and tiny homes for the homeless and housing first programs could reduce homelessness in the United States. Thanks for your time. I hope you learned something and enjoyed the information. Again, my name's Megan. Thank you. Lastly, here's a list of the references. Thanks again.